Hello and welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Artist Equity Grants for fiscal year 2022, which for us runs from July 1st today through June 30th of 2022. I am Carolyn Koska, Financial and Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. I'll just first run down what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll take a look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll go over to our website and see what resources are available for you there. Then we'll go into our grant system and walk through the application for this program. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process. In other words, what happens after you submit an application. We will stop for questions a couple of times during the presentation. And then at the end, if you have something that you'd like to talk more about, a specific project that you're thinking about, we can do that then. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor and promote the arts in their communities. This is our region of our 18 counties down in this corner here. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes mainly from the state through an allocation from their general fund, but also mostly through the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for some of our grants for artists, and from individuals and organizations in our region through memberships and donations. Some things that we are committed to include supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are just a few things to keep in mind as you're thinking about types of projects, because everything will ultimately need to relate back to these commitments that we have. On to our Artist Equity Grant Program. Our intent with this program is to aid Black, Indigenous, and other artists of color with projects that will advance their skills and artistic careers. As an organization, we acknowledge that Indigenous people and communities of color have historically been marginalized and underserved, so we are committed to closing gaps in arts access. By providing these dedicated resources and recognition to artists of color in our region, we hope to support those artists in writing their own narratives. The Artist Equity Grant Program is open to artists of color and Indigenous artists, including all of those mentioned here. Also, you need to live within the 18 counties of our service region. Here are the counties that are eligible, or on tribal lands within our service area. We acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. Also, you need to be at least 18 years old by the time of signing a grant contract if you would be awarded a grant. You can be at any stage of your artistic career to apply for this, and you may be working in any art discipline. So as you're thinking about what you might do with these grant funds, there are a few different types of projects that you could think about. If you are going to be creating new work, eligible expenses would be things like any supplies or equipment needed for that. If you need to rent some space, if you have some costs of doing research into something you're going to be working on, You can pay yourself for your time to work on this project. And also the funds can cover daycare costs if that's something that's necessary in order to let you be working on your artwork. You could also have a project that's more about sharing your work, and that would cover costs related to framing or recording, editing, or other things involved in publishing, putting together a portfolio, and creating a website. And then you also could be doing something that's related to your artistic or professional development. And that would include things like attending a class, doing a one-on-one study with a mentor, or going to a conference. So you can definitely grab from each of these three categories of things for your project. It just kind of helps to think about those areas of what you could do. So the artist equity grants are available for up to $4,000, and there is no match required, which means that you would not need to put up any of your own money toward the project unless the project costs more than the amount that you can request. So these are some things that we can't fund with this grant. We can't fund requests for equipment that are not specifically related to the project that you're going to be doing. Credits or materials necessary to fill degree requirements for students. College students are eligible to apply, but their project has to be completely separate from what they are doing for school. We also can't fund applications about developing curriculum plans or teaching materials. We really want you to focus on yourself as an artist through this project. And we can't fund requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate, activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that take place outside of Minnesota, since we are using state funds for this grant program. We can't fund activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, or applicants with a past grant project still in progress or a past due final report. So you can only be working on one grant project from us at a time. So it's a good idea to check our complete program guidelines, and we also have some general guidelines that apply to all of our grants, just to make sure you've got everything covered as you're thinking about applying. And we'll take a look at where you can find those in a little bit. So you need to choose a start date and an end date for your project. Your start date is really when you start anything at all toward your project, even if you're just ordering supplies or you're registering for a conference that you're planning to go to, having any auditions or rehearsals or advertising. So with that in mind, your start date should not be the date of your first activity. So if you are going to be attending a class, the start date would not be first day of the class. It would need to be before that, since you can't spend any money before the project start date. And then for your end date, all projects that are awarded this year need to be finished up by June 30th, 2023. We have an ongoing deadline for this grant program. So it's open from August 1st through May 1st. And you can submit anytime during that time. And then the earliest project start date that you could have would be at least 30 days after the date that you are submitting that. So the deadline will be going on basically either until we get to May 1st or until we run out of funding for that program. So it's probably better to apply earlier rather than later. And if you submit by the first of the month, your application will be reviewed and acted on by the end of that month. So if you submitted by August 1st, by the end of August, you would know whether you received a grant or not and be able to start your project in September. So now I can stop for some questions here.
Hi, Caroline. I have a question. So because I also run a nonprofit organization and we're planning to apply for some of the nonprofit grants, can I still apply as an individual artist, or is that not going to work?
Yes, you can apply as an artist. The grants for your organization will be considered completely separately from you as an artist. So you wouldn't have to finish up an organization grant first in order to apply for an artist
Okay.
grant.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a citizen, I'm a resident. Can I still apply?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else at the moment?
So another question is, does the project have to be one big project, or can it be like, you know, 3 different projects combined?
I guess it kind of depends on how you explain what you're doing. If you're trying to do sort of 3 different projects, you might not score as well because people might think you're kind of spreading yourself too thin for the amount of time that you had.
So I'm a sculptor and I make like big sculpting pieces, and I have an idea of wanting to do like a collection of sculptures, and they're gonna all carry the same theme, but it's gonna be like different pieces. So that's why instead of like doing one big one, I want to do 3 separate ones, and it's all gonna carry the same theme. Like that's what I asked.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely fine. That's totally normal for what we usually fund because it's kind of
Okay.
a collection of
Yes.
works. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, I am going to move us over to our website next. There are a couple of places where you can access our grant system. The first and easiest place is on our homepage. If you scroll down beneath those slides, there's this black grants box, and there's the login button right there. So that'll be your fastest way to get into the system. And then I'll show you another way here. Here are our artist equity grants. And right at the top of that page, there's this apply now button. So that'll take you to that login as well. You don't have to be applying to click this button. It'll just take you to the login. So other things that are here on this page for you, it explains how the deadlines work. And then we've got some materials for you here. These are the grant guidelines for this program. Then we've got our general grant guidelines, which apply to all of our grant programs. We have the application questions here in a Word document. Some people like to work in that first for their draft and then paste their answers into the grant system later. A couple different options for you here for the budget form, but we'll take a look at that within the application as well. This is the list of scoring criteria that the reviewers will use to look at your application. Coming soon are the final report questions in a Word document. And here are just a couple tutorials about using the grant system. All right, so we are going to head on over to the grant system by clicking our Apply Now button. If you have used the system before, you can just log in. If you are totally new, you can create an account here. Suri, you may probably want to create a separate account for yourself as an individual. And if you're not sure whether you already have an account in the system or not, please talk to us and we can get that figured out for you. I'm just going to log us in here. All right, if you are returning to the grant system, you'll come right to your dashboard when you log in. But the first time you come into here, you'll go straight to this apply page. So this page lists all of the grants that we currently have open. You'll want to scroll down to find the one you need. We've got some grants for organizations at the top here. Here is our artist equity. If you want to just look at the application without actually starting anything, there's this preview button here, or if you're ready to actually start, there's an apply button, and that's what we're going to hit now. All right, so here's our application. I'm just going to point out a couple of buttons at the top here that are helpful. We have Google Translate embedded into the system. So if you would like to work in a different language, you can change that here. We have this Copy Previous Answers button. If you have done an application before, under this account, you can copy answers from that into a new application that can save you some time. Then we also have the Collaborate button. If you are going to be working with someone on this application, if you want somebody to proofread it for you, or say the teacher that you're working with wants to include some of samples of their work and put them directly in here, this is a good way to use this. So you just put that person's email address here and select what level of permission you want to give them. Type in the message what you'd like them to do, and that'll send them an invitation. They'll just need to create a quick password, and then they'll be able to come in here and also work on the application. As you're getting started, we've just got a little reminder here about some ways to get help. If you click here, that will take you to my calendar. You can schedule some time right on there. You just choose how you'd like to meet. And then grab a day and a time, and that will just schedule a meeting with me, or feel free to email any questions to me. That's my email there. So you'll start by entering in a name for your project. Here is the amount you're requesting. You may want to wait until you do your budget form to fill that in. Then just asking some demographic questions here and verifying your contact information. Then again, here we've got those few documents that we were talking about before, and some tips for grant writing. I just want to touch on the character limits. You'll see that the limit for the narrative fields is really large. We are really not expecting you to come close to using up that much space. We want to provide it in case there's something that you have a lot to say about, but really, depending on the question, a few sentences or a couple paragraphs will probably be enough, as long as you're talking about everything that was asked in the question. So you're asked to describe what project you're going to be doing. If you'll be making some new work, just kind of the scope of what you're planning to do. Is there a certain number of pieces you're hoping to produce? What is your artistic vision for the work? Is there something you're trying to say with this work? Is there a particular aesthetic that you're going for? And then if your project has a study opportunity, you can describe that and some information about the teacher, and outline your timeline for the project. Then we have this optional section where you can just provide some additional information. If there's more information about a workshop that you're going to, or about a mentor that you're working with. If you want to provide some more detail about particular equipment you're requesting, or explaining more about a certain medium or technique that maybe not everyone would be familiar with. You've got a couple of places to upload and add links here. Then you've got your project start and end dates. And then we come to the budget. You've got a couple options for this. We have an Excel and a PDF budget form that you can use, but you also can create your own budget form as well. For the moment, we're just going to look at the Excel form. All right, so here is your form. You can put your project title in there. You've got plenty of space to describe the different expenses that you're going to have, and then you can put some amounts in there. And you'll see that it's totaling for you down at the bottom here. And then this helps you double check the amount you're requesting. So this will grab your cash costs. So your request cannot be more than $2,600 based on what we entered in there, or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So we would look down the list here. Here's artist equity, 4,000. 2,600 is less than 4,000, so that's how much we can request. If on the other hand, your project costs more than the amount you can request, you can just list down here where that other funding might be coming from. So you would fill this out and save it, and then upload that here into the application. There's also a budget narrative field if you need to break down some costs a little more than you had room for in the budget form. Especially if you are paying for time for yourself, it's a good idea to break it down into, I'm expecting to spend so many hours at a certain rate, and that's how I came up with this number. All right. The next section just talks about your experience and your work. So you can either, if you have an artist resume, you can upload that here, or you can use this text box to describe your training and experience. If you are working in folk or traditional art, we just ask that you explain your connection to the community that comes from, and what kind of relationship or recognition you and your work have with that community. If you have an artist website, you can enter that here. Then we need some samples of your work. Here are just some parameters of if you're submitting different types of things like written materials or images or video. And you've got 8 of these large upload fields, and then also a bunch of link fields as well to include your work. And if this is something that is not working well for you, you can just contact us and we can help you figure out how to get your work attached into the application for you. Then you're asked to think about your goals for the project, or what kind of impact you're hoping this is going to have. So what artistic needs is this project going to meet for you? And thinking about where you are now in your artistic career, how is this project going to contribute to your growth as an artist from that place? So you'd be looking for some specific changes that you're hoping for. And then under this measurement section, then you're asked, how are you going to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? And some things other artists have done are getting some feedback from their instructors or peers, comparing older work to newer work, recording progress in a journal throughout the project, just a way to be able to show the impact that this project has had for you. Then we've just got a couple more numbers that we are collecting. All this little data collection section doesn't have any bearing on your application, just some numbers that we need to pass along to the state. Then we've got just verifying your legal name versus if you use a different name in your role as an artist, and how you want that to work. And you'll finish up with your electronic signature here. So the application will be auto-saving as you're working on it, but there is a button down at the bottom where you can save, and here's the submit button for when you're ready. We are going to click the save application. When you do that, it'll show you these are the questions that you still need to answer. So it's a good way to kind of help you keep track of your progress. If you want to keep working, you would just click this continue button, but we're going to head back to our dashboard. And now here is the application that we just started. And to go back in and keep working on it, you would just click this edit application link. If you are awarded a grant, this is the same place you would come back to grab your contract or final report to work on. All right, we are going to jump back to our slides and stop another minute for some questions. Well, not hearing any questions, we're going to keep on going. Just some tips as you are writing your application. It's a really good idea to start early just to make sure you have plenty of time to gather everything you need, like getting your work samples together. If you need to get some information from a teacher that you're working with, or to just get any questions answered from us. Again, make sure to read the guidelines. And then you also saw that the questions in the application, most of them have multiple parts to it. So make sure you are covering each of those points in your answer. We talked a little bit about no need to try and pad out your answers to make it look like more as long as you're fully answering the question. Also, don't worry about trying to write in grant language. Really just if you're writing as if you were just explaining this to somebody that you're talking to, that's great in just an everyday writing style. It's also good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about you or your project, or sometimes if you have a more obscure art form, it's a good thing to think about if somebody was reading this who doesn't know me, doesn't know the kinds of work that I do, to sort of read through with that lens and see if everything makes sense. So for that reason, it's really good to have somebody proofread your application. There are several ways that you can get some assistance with your application. First, it's a good idea to call us before you even start an application and just talk about your project, and we can make sure you're starting in the right grant program. You can contact us anytime with questions as you're filling out your application. And then we as staff can actually review your application for you before you submit it. If you let us know that you've got something ready, and we can take a look and see if there's anything that you're missing or a question where you needed to go in a little different direction, things like that. So if you're able to let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we are able to take a look at that for you. So what happens after you submit your application? First, we as staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if at that stage we find something missing or incorrect, you'll get 48 hours to fix whatever that is. Then the applications will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a second. And then their recommendations go to our full board, who will make the final funding decisions. So the criteria for this program are the feasibility of the project. That's worth 3 points. Then your work and your experience, that is worth 18 points. And then the project's contribution to your growth, worth 10 points. And if you pull up that sheet that's linked on our website and in the application, there's more information under each one of these, so you can get a little better idea of what they're looking for. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete an online contract. After doing that, you'll receive 80% of your grant award around the time of your start date. And then you'll receive the remaining 20% of the grant award after your project and your final report are completed. If you're putting out any sort of marketing about your project, the grant will need to be acknowledged on that. There's a credit line that you'll need to use. You may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo, but we will send you everything that you need, so you won't need to worry about getting the right text on there. You'll need to do a final report within 60 days after your project end date. And it's a good idea to take a look through the report when you're just starting your project, just to know what kind of information you're going to need to have ready in order to fill that out. That is it for our artist equity grants. I just wanted to point out a couple more grants for artists that we have available. We have a new program this year, Quick Support for Artists. This is a good place for people to just kind of get their feet wet in the world of grant projects. It's just a small grant of $1,000, but we've got a quick deadline on this one as well. The first of the month, August through April. We have a webinar coming up on this one on July 19th. Then we have our individual artists for emerging and established career artist grants. That is for $2,500 for emerging artists and up to $7,000 for established artists. Also our community collaboration grant, and that provides up to $10,000 for artists who are creating new work while heavily collaborating with the community. And there's a deadline coming up for all of these. The next deadline is August 2nd. Here's just some information to contact us, and that's it that I've got for presentation. So if there's anything you'd like to talk about your specific projects, we can do that now.
So I have a question. With all these different grants available, can we apply for all of them and then just see if we have a chance at any one of those? Or do you just suggest that we just choose to apply for one and then see if we get accepted?
I would probably just apply for one first. I mean, especially if you are starting out with either this quick support or this artist equity one, because those have such a quick turnaround. You'll know within a month whether you've gotten it or not, and then you still would have more opportunities to apply.
So for somebody who is like really brand new, what would you like describe as an emerging artist? Like, is that just somebody who is like new into the art scene, or?
Yeah, we're really making the distinction between, well, we think of it as kind of a continuum from emerging through established. And it's more based on your career as an artist versus your actual work. So an emerging artist, they could definitely have really developed amazing work already, but they probably have not had any showing of their work, or at least, and probably not a solo show at all.
Got it. So like school show doesn't count, right? Like school, like art show doesn't count. Like it has to be like their own show to be considered an established artist.
And if you're all the way over to established artists, you probably have had multiple solo shows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Anything else that I can answer?
Yes, I have one more question for the artist equity grant. Like, is it possible to divert some that will go to the art project itself and then some to the website that will showcase the artwork?
Yes, definitely. I think you missed, I'm going to just go back to the beginning here. So you can do any combination of these things, stuff that's actually needed for creating your work, stuff that's needed for sharing your work, or if you're doing some sort of study opportunity. So
Okay.
any and all of
Got it.
that can be included in there. Anything else that I can answer today?
For the artist equity grant, is it only one person who can be eligible for this, or can multiple people apply, and like how many will actually get this?
I want to say we have maybe 6 of these to give out this year.
Okay.
All right. I'll ask just one more time for questions. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope to hear from you.